what about this, sorry Mark, it reminds us of this deal. Sometimes we're always hopeful, but at the end, those hopes are usually dashed. There was this deal, we were told, signed by the government of the country with the Russian government. So when you talk about gas now, we know that Russia is one of those who have gone ahead in that technology, how they can really pipe gas in so many parts of Europe. So could you bring us up to speed on that?
The gas problem is not that there's no gas. We are essentially a gas country, about the third now in the world. The problem is this: the gas owned by the gas companies, you have to have agreement with them. You have to have gas facility transportation agreement. So the idea is this: in the past, why would the gas was selling for $1 or $2 in the international market, and it was selling here for maybe 30 cents, 50 cents. Now what government has done is to create gas export price parity over time. In the next 2 or 3 years, gas will stabilize at a price, so there's incentive to focus gas on domestic use. That's one. Two, you need to incentivize people to make the investment in infrastructure. So what we've done now with the tariff we have today, the cost of the tariff we are going to get in a couple of weeks or so, gas owners will be ready to enter into gas agreement because it's securitized. They are sure that once they can supply gas for 10 years or 6 years or 5 years, because the tariff will allow you to pay back. Today we are owing gas suppliers, the GenCos are owing them so much money. So what is the problem is it's not that there's no gas. The problem is that you need agreement and infrastructure to take gas from where it exists to where you need it. And most of the plants were sited without thinking about where would the gas come from. So what government is doing now is to extend. NNPC has a very strong project to extend the gas pipelines and gas infrastructure to where it meets with the plants.
So at the moment, is there any of those, say, Papalanto, any of those outfits that have been long completed getting supply of gas now?
Well, what's happening that, for example, there are Oturoji gas projects. Many of the gas projects are ongoing. A few of them, most of the NIPP, some of their plants are getting gas supply, but some of the plants are not yet completed because the gas work going on is still uncompleted. And by their projection, in 2012, some of these gas projects completed. Some are going to be completed in 2013.
What about the ones that have been completed?
The ones that's completed have been commissioned as the gas comes in. That's one. Secondly, too, many of them have gas, but they don't have sufficient gas to fire all their turbines.
Which ones have been completed?
For example, I give you
Papalanto is completed.
It's completed in terms of the plant.
Yeah.
The gas supply getting to them may not be sufficient to power all the plants. So what you have is that some capacity of, let's say, 150 can be giving you 50 megawatts until they have enough gas to go there. So what's happening actually is that the good news is that each of these problems have a roadmap to deal with them, because you are having the investment in gas facility, you are having, you are recovering the lost capacity, you have a tariff that gives, because that's a central thing. If the gas suppliers don't have assurance that they're going to recover their money, nobody will make that investment. I give an example. Some of the private entities like Sevens Energy, they have contracts to supply gas. So they started making investment in gas infrastructure because they know that through the tariff structure, they will recover their money.
Okay, now tell us about this tariff structure. Sometime in July this year, you had cause to say that electricity tariff haven't been increased. That this is in line with the multi-year tariff order that came into effect in 2008. So tell us a little more about that multi-year tariff order. Are we going to be seeing increases periodically as part of that multi-year tariff order?
Yeah, what happens to the multi-year tariff order is it brings certainty. We say, okay, in a 5-year span, these are the price of electricity. And how do you work it out? You work it out with the cost and also with the quantity expected. So, for example, we are using a more modest estimation that in 2012 you could have 5,000, 6,000 megawatts. So we don't want to go like overboard. So that gives us an idea. That's one. Two, the tariff says instead of a yearly review, we're now thinking about 6-month, half-year review, and that allows us to go back to reality check. So if, for example, we are projecting 6,000 megawatts and then we had 8,000, it means that the average tariff might still go a little lower. That's one. Two, third is that the tariff we're doing also is goes on with some degree of cross-subsidy. We're not going to bring a tariff that everybody pays everything, including the market woman in the village, including the industrialists and commercial personnel. The tariff present, the average cost is shared according to the cost of service. And we have what we call lifeline tariff, which says if you are consuming, let's say, less than 50 kilowatts per month, which gives you like 4 bulbs, maybe a standing fan, you pay just nothing, zero, because you're not taking much from the network. Now, as you move on, in cladding block, as you move on, you pay a little bit more. So the whole idea is that by January, we'll have a new tariff. Now, when that tariff will take effect is subject to a policy from government, because there will be some kind of sensitivity analysis. Is it the right time to build the tariff, or should we wait a few more months? But by January, the tariff will be announced. And that new tariff, what it does simply is that it signals to investment, the kind of investment we're talking about now, in all the sectors. So if that tariff is announced, gas owners will build more gas infrastructure, knowing that they can recover the cost. Generators, some of our licenses, their problem is accessing for finance from the banks. And the banks are good. The two questions I ask you is, how much will they sell their power? Just like another product, and who will buy it? Now, if they have a PPA from the bulk trader and they have a tariff that makes sense, we are, apart from 1 or 2 countries in the world, we're the least electricity tariff paying country, including in Ghana and our neighbors. So once they have that kind of sensible tariff, they will begin to make those kind of investments. So our tariff next year is not a tariff to just impose hardship. No, it's a tariff to signal the kind of investment that will stabilize power and reduce overall household budget on generating power for ourselves, using diesel, using generators and all that. Secondly, this tariff will also signal conservatory practice on ourselves. Some people don't put on the lights. In the afternoon, you see street lights are on when there are no lights at the offices. It simply shows that somebody is not paying the bill. We want a tariff that provides incentive for people to manage their energy consumption better. And by so doing, they free more energy. The argument is that it takes you much more money, $1 million to produce 1 megawatt, but it takes you less money to conserve 1 megawatt for other people use. So if you put off your light, use energy efficient bulbs, you are saving power. And the only incentive to do that is that somebody pays for the bill, and then the person knows that if he saves energy, he pays less. If he has energy efficient appliances, he saves money. And therefore, and if you have a stable power, 24 hours or 10 hours or 20 hours a day, the exposure to paying for the generator and service, all those costs, and even the human and social costs are minimized. So that's the idea behind the tariff.
It sounds like you have a pretty ideal plan, in the sense that it seems that at some point the laws of demand and supply will come in and help bring down the prices of tariff, and also it seems that commercial enterprises will pay more or bear the burden for those in rural areas. But it doesn't also show or mean that at some point, I mean, especially now that we do not exactly have enough supply, as it were, it also means the commercial enterprises will get it first before those, say, in rural areas. Well,
they don't get first. What happens is this. You see, the incentive for distributors is to try to serve those that pay, basically. And so that's why people don't expand services to rural areas. And that's why Nigeria is still about 40% connected to the grid. About more than 40 or 50% of our people don't have any form of electricity from the grid. The argument here is that you bring back Rural Electrification Agency, you incentivize the discos to expand services, and that's why the governors, we did an embedded generation regulation that allows states and other entities to embed generators in their state and distribute the power within their state. So, for example, Lagos State government, through a private company, can generate 20 megawatts and say we want to drop it in Ekpe, and has agreement with the DISCO and say this power will be for Ekpe. To even help further, we made another regulation called Independent Electricity Distribution Network regulation that allows people to set up small microgrid. So it can actually have Lagos State government or a company in Lagos have a distribution company here for rural areas.
It doesn't have to go to the grid.
Absolutely, because the idea here is that if the existing Eco distribution or Ikeja has no incentive to expand service to those areas, they have no network there, and they're not willing because it's not commercially viable for them or for whatever reason, an independent distributor can get a license with us and then distribute power. And then when it's embedded too, when you have the generator himself distributing what we call embedded IEND, then it means that you have their power. You don't think about transmission cost. You don't think about whether TCN has a line. You simply have a generator here, and then you distribute it within this area. So what we're trying to do is that, but before we develop our national grid to up to 40,000 megawatts, 20,000 megawatts, and then the whole transmission lines are meshed together so that you don't have places where there's no transmission, we can still cure this shortage of supply by having embedded generation. We have power that we can drop in the state and then use for that state without having to go to the grid.